You're listening to the Turn Autism Around podcast, episode number 125. Today, we have a special guest, a member of our online course and community. She's also a member of our book launch team, and her name is Elizabeth. So before we get to introducing Elizabeth and this really great interview with her, I do want to encourage anyone who hasn't gotten the book yet, Turn Autism Around, an action guide for parents of young children with early signs of autism. You can get this anywhere books are sold around the world. You can get it in hardcover, Audible, and or Kindle. And it's already selling really great. It sold over 13,000 copies in under a month out. So we have over 85-star Amazon reviews. It's really, the reaction to it has been incredible. So you don't even have to buy the book. You could just look at the first chapter, hear the second chapter by going to turnautismaround.com and hit the book resources section. Give us your name and email address, and we will send you the book resources, including some videos, a chapter in writing, a chapter on Audible, and all the book resources for free. So turnautismaround.com. So let me tell you a little bit about Elizabeth and her introduction, which is going to be pretty brief. So Elizabeth is an ordained Presbyterian minister. She started having concerns about her son when he was 2, eating concerns and some other early warning signs of autism. And then the world shut down. And so in her search, she found my online course and community, and she's been a very enthusiastic member, seeing a lot of results and a lot of transformation within her child and family. So she has some important messages, and we talk all about how to address some of these issues, and how the strategies she's learning in the course are not just good for very, very young children, but they're also good for older children who have significant needs in the area of talking, tantrums, eating, sleeping, potty training. It's all in the book at turnautismaround.com. So let's get to this great interview with Elizabeth. So Elizabeth, thanks so much for joining us today.
It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you, Mary.
I feel like I already know you, even though we've never met in person on video or live in person, but you have been a real supporter of my work and a real outspoken advocate to get things started for kids. So can you please just start out by describing your fall into the whole autism world, or when you started to have some concerns?
Yeah, it's really interesting, Mary, because all of this happened for me in the midst of this past year when, right, we experienced the COVID pandemic of being locked down, and it just felt like life was very isolated. And so it was actually in the midst of that time, we'd been having some concerns about my son, especially about eating. And so I do want to say that's one tremendous gift of this program, is learning about how eating concerns are connected to is definitely a red flag to be aware of. So he'd been having some eating concerns. We really weren't making a lot of progress, but we just got started with birth to 3 early interventionalists were coming to the house. And then suddenly it's like, okay, nobody can come. We're all stuck here. And I honestly did a Google search. I did a Google search and I found out about your program. Like many other people in the community, I found out about the opportunity to do the workshops. And, I'd heard the word autism, and it had only ever been connected with very specific things, often connected with severe intellectual disability, just a lot of real red flags that I wasn't seeing in my son. So I had no idea I wouldn't have made the connection if I didn't start reading more and thinking more. Um,
So
so
when you were Googling, you weren't Googling autism.
Actually, I was. Actually, I was. So, like, one of our early interventionalists had just said the word to me. So, she had said the word, but she really didn't know. I didn't know. The only thing I knew was, again, like, kind of my actually being an elementary school student and knowing a few students with autism who were more severely impaired by their autism. And that was the only thing I knew. And so, but I found out about this course and was very intrigued. I did the workshop and then decided to do the course and move forward.
The toddler preschooler course.
Yes. Yes.
Which I have two different courses, which you're now in the second course as well. But I have the toddler preschooler course, which a lot of people find their way kind of even before the diagnosis. And so your son wasn't diagnosed with anything except for some delays, and he had early intervention come in, and you were basically stuck at home with no services. So you were searching for help, right?
Yeah, searching for help, searching for information, and also just really, I felt pretty helpless because we knew there was an eating concern, and we were doing a few different techniques of like having him play with food, but it wasn't going anywhere, you know, and I just felt like I was continuing to do the same thing and was not reaching, he wasn't progressing. So felt really frustrated, very alone.
And this was back in the spring of
Yes, this was back in the spring.
And before you go on, because one of the things I learned, and I consider myself pretty much of a feeding expert in this area, but one of the things I learned as I was writing my new book, Turn Autism Around, chapter 10 is all about, it's called Solve Picky Eating. And as I was writing it, I reached out to Dr. Keith Williams, who is a feeding expert, an international feeding expert, who I learned a lot from. And he reviewed the book as specifically the chapter on feeding. And he was also on my podcast, and it's really a great podcast episode, number 95. But one of the things I learned is that in 2019, there was a study, and I can try to link this in the show notes. But there was a study done in 2019 that actually showed that picky eating is now a diagnostic indicator for possible autism. It is a red flag. It's a bona fide red flag. Like before that, we always thought that kids with picky eating, were more at risk for autism, but this actually showed that to be true. So if you have a 2-year-old who's showing some signs of autism, but a 2-year-old that's showing some signs of autism plus picky eating or having feeding problems like not swallowing well, not progressing from baby food to real food, like what kind of feeding concerns was your son doing?
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Okay. So he was stuck on the baby food jars. I think as I'd shared, if anyone's had saw the little success story I shared, I brought this cupcake to him for his first birthday. And, every parent is so excited about that moment. And he just cried. He was scared of it. He also did something that I had no idea what it was, which was a visual choking. He would see solid food and visually have a reaction to it. Now he's not doing that anymore. I'm happy to say, like that's been
gagging at the sight of food.
Yeah, gagging, exactly. Gagging at the sight of food. And honestly, I didn't even know to look for that or really understand it. So for a while, we just really weren't doing much at all other than just continuing the baby food or whatever we could try to puree for him. But yeah, he's likes soft textured food. He's still very much like soft texture food, although he's been growing with his palate, which has been a good thing. So,
Okay. And you are not a first-time mom with your son.
no, I have an older son, and in a way, I think that has been helpful because um, although there's obviously similarities, my older son, yeah, he transitioned quite easily. And so I knew there was an issue. My older son transitioned to an open cup at 9 months. We just transitioned out of the bottle. That's my accomplishment for my son. And that's, as I know many of you listening to this know how hard that can be. Those were indicators that there was more going on for him, and that my youngest son needs more support.
Yeah. So what kind of gain? So your son is how old now?
He is 2 and 10 months
Okay.
now.
So
Yeah.
he was right around 2 when or a little before 2.
Yes.
He started to show concerns and delays, and you found my course. And so in the past, so you have been in my courses for not a year.
Yeah, it's not been a year yet. Actually, it started in July, Mary. So started in July and did the toddler course. I want to say this to parents if this might be helpful for you. It really it took me a while, and obviously my son a while, till we really could kind of get to the table and make progress. Like I had to do, and everybody's different, but I had to do a good amount of the work of the course, and you want us to do that. We go through at least through the third module, I think it is. But I had to really understand a lot of concepts, and I would just bring him to the table, reinforce the table. And he wasn't doing a lot at first. And I know for us as parents, that can just be really frustrating because we feel like this isn't working. But, he was, I'd say, 26 months, 27 months, not much was going on. And then it was like right before 2.5, I had enough in my head to kick in gear the teaching, and it felt like he was at this place developmentally where he was ready to. And that is where the floodgates opened for us.
Yeah. So so what happened? What did that look like, the floodgates opening?
Yeah. So for those of you who have participated in the courses, you know that we reinforce the table, and there's specific learning materials that we use. And what we did a lot in the beginning and still continue to use, I just use them in different ways now, are flashcards. And so I put the flashcards on the table. And again, this is working with my son who had joint attention. He was able to do things with me, but the focus was not there. But suddenly I was telling him, or with the shoebox program, as well as with the flashcards, when he tacks with the flashcards, duck, duck, duck. And I'd give him the duck and he was instantly able to match. So I knew what I thought I knew, which is that the receptive language was there. But I also realized he needed the visual. Without the visual, we'd been doing a lot of speech therapy, and again, it was wonderful. It was good, but it was 1 hour. And so we started with the flashcards on the table. We did the shoebox program where you're holding up a flashcard, a real life picture of his favorite things. I'm saying milk, milk, milk. He grabbed it, or he'd say it first, grab it, put it in the shoebox. And And then the big thing is I started doing puzzles with him. And I'll tell you, at first I was sad. It was like he couldn't get it in. He couldn't understand clicking. Within a week, he could put those puzzles in. He memorized every shape. He knew what the pentagon was. He knew what the rectangle was. He knew all of his letters. And I realized like that was his super, I call it a superpower of, of that visual memory.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, and a
so
lot of kids, Lucas, my son, he had hyperlexia, which is an interest and ability with letters and numbers before you can really even speak. And so a lot of times we don't want to like get them super obsessed with that, and that can have its problems. But yeah, if the child likes letters, and saying the letter names is usually really easy. A, B, C, they're all one syllable. It makes sense, and a lot of kids really do well with visuals and with puzzles and matching. And so that's why table time includes not just focus on speaking, because some kids, it takes weeks or months or sometimes years to get word approximations, to get words, but sometimes it can happen a lot quicker, especially if the child already has some words, some what I call now pop out words. So it sounds like you had a period of time, only a few months, where it was super confusing, and then you stumbled upon my courses, which now my toddler preschool course is in my book, Turn
yes.
Autism Around, which makes it a lot more accessible, that people really can borrow it from a library. They can, get it at a very low cost, get it with a free Kindle trial or a free Audible trial, and really start to make headway right away. And it sounds like once you entered the courses, there was, you were persistent, and you were driven to watch the modules, to do it. Just when you buy any course, it's not the money exchange that's going to do anything. You actually have to watch the stuff and
Yes.
do it. And not all kids are going to make rapid progress. Like I did a podcast interview with Michelle, which is another mom who got stuck in the middle of COVID, shut down without services. And that's episode 78. We can link that in the show notes. And I've done multiple interviews with moms like you. And, Michelle's daughter made all kind of progress in 33 days. She went from, the floodgates opened in 33 days. It sounds like your son took a few months, but a few months is certainly great. So, yeah.
Yeah. And I think, also as having, you can compare, right? We compare our children to other kids the same age. And sometimes that's really helpful in order to see those early warning signs. But it's also just helpful to remember that kids, whether on the autistic spectrum or not, develop at different times. And sometimes, so you really, I think as a parent, we want to stay as positive as we can be. But yeah, I mean, my son was not doing animal sounds, for one example, Mary. It wasn't until like we started with animals at the table and suddenly he could do all the animal sounds. And that's, I think, was really important to me because I'm very close to all of my early interventionist therapists. And I really wanted them, and I've been a big advocate of your program and sharing it with them too, so that they can also try to incorporate these techniques with their kids, that they can see, okay, if we have a child with an early eating issue, maybe we need to try this other approach, or get our in my state, we have a child psychologist who can do ABA therapy with the child through birth to 3. I wasn't told that immediately, nor did I know to think of that. So parents, that might be something for you to think about if your child's still in birth to 3 program while you're waiting to get services.
Yeah, a lot of times, like I had a contract with our birth to 3 contract agency in my county from 2010-ish to 2016. And I was a board certified behavior analyst. I would go in for behavior, and but only people that really, like one of my first clients through the birth to three, he was 2, and he did so much banging his head on hard and soft surfaces that he actually had an open lesion on his head. And so they were like, oh boy, we need a behavior analyst or a behavior person. And so, but for these kids like your son who don't even have a diagnosis at this point, you can still request ABA. And it may take a little work and it may take a lot of advocacy, but in some cases you can get it. And now autism ABA funding for kids with a diagnosis is covered and mandated it to be covered in all 50 states. So you might have to do a little bit of pushing, but I think your first step, if you're sitting out or if you're listening, whether you're a parent or an early intervention professional or a professional that works with older kids that are still functioning in a 1 to 5 year old level, I think the first best step is to read the book and see some of the stories, see some of the procedures, see how simple it is laid out. And then definitely, I think the online course where you can see videos and you can, really make some headway. And it's different when you explain it in a book, but when you see it on a video and then you can go into the community and be like, hey, he's still throwing Mr. Potato Head. Like, I don't know what to do. And it's like, okay, he's throwing Potato Head. Okay. So, Kelsey's son was throwing Potato Head and not sitting at the table for 6 weeks, and he's made all kind of progress. So everybody's on their own trajectory. So, one of the frustrations I have is, and this podcast is for parents and professionals, so I'm talking to both groups, as well as grandparents and other concerned people, is, the parents are learning all of this, and then they're trying to give tips or spoon feed the early intervention professionals. But especially when you get to the other course, the verbal behavior bundle, where you're intermediate learners and teaching prepositions and pronouns and yes, no, it's like, no, you can't, the professional actually needs to take it, because a lot is going to get missed in the translation. And I really encourage both parents and professionals to read the book and do the courses together or independently, because it is a new ABA approach. It is more simplified, and it is really proven with hundreds, thousands of people from over 80 countries who have done it.
Yeah.
And so your son has early intervention professionals still coming in.
Yes, although we're transitioning out from that, and it was one of those early interventionists who mentioned the term autism to me, and we did go ahead, and I had my son diagnosed during this period to be evaluated, and I'll just say it was a different kind of experience, because part of it was virtual, part of it was in person. One really helpful thing for me, one of many, about being part of the online courses, and also that you'll experience as you read the book, is learning the techniques of how to do table time, for example, so that when I took my son to be evaluated there at the local children's hospital, I had an idea of what they were doing, what they were saying. I felt like he was able to show to some extent what he could do, and it really made me feel less alone in that process. So I'm really grateful for that.
Yeah. And, also before table time, which is the third step of the approach, we have assessment, which is the first step. So you already are learning how to assess, whether you're experienced in assessment or have an education background or not, you're learning how to assess. So that way, when you go for an assessment, you know how to do it. I tell the story lots of places, maybe on this podcast in the past, where when Lucas was 3, I brought him in and they asked me to fill out a form, like, can he touch his body parts? And I was like, yes. And then they brought him and they're like, yeah, we're not seeing touching his body parts. Can you show us how you get him to touch his body parts? And I was like, oh yeah, you have to sing the Barney song and do, first we touch our head and then our toes and then our belly and then our nose or whatever. And you got to sing the song. You have to show him. It's like, that's
Mm.
not touching body parts receptively.
Yeah.
But as a parent who doesn't know the situation, and you don't have an education background, you're a minister, right?
Yes, I'm a pastor. I did a liberal arts education in my background before then. So I've taken, I've taken maybe the introduction of child psychology, right? So that's about it, other than raising my older son and what you just know generally. But oh yeah, a lot of this was very new to me. I will say we're closing in with our time with Berta 3, and this my service coordinator told me, she's like, if you ever step down from the ministry, I hope you'll consider like therapy work. And I found that interesting, but I think they just realized, how passionate I am about learning what I have learned through your course and from other resources to help my son.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. So, so you're moving over to 3-year-old services. Are you getting ABA? Is that the plan, or how does that work? And you're in which state?
yeah, we're in West Virginia. And so we found they're actually just started last year a center and then just 5 minutes away, which is crazy. And I've connected with the BCBA there, and they start services at 3. So my son has the opportunity to start there
Nice.
in August, September. So he's been doing a little one-on-one uh, with her, and also with the BCBA. Well, she's not a BCBA, excuse me, with the child psychologist in Birth to 3.
Yeah. And that's another, I think, misconception is and there's people from all over the world listening. So there's not, BCBAs down the street in many places that people are listening, and it really doesn't take a master's degree in education or a BCBA to put these practices in place step by step. We're positive, we're child friendly, we're always thinking about prevention of problem behaviors, always thinking about helping the parent, empowering the parent to see the whole picture, helping the child in eating and sleeping, potty training, whatever the situation is. We want a child to get better in areas where they're having difficulties, increase their strengths, decrease their weaknesses, use their strengths. So are you still, what kind of keeps you up at night now? Anything?
Yeah. Oh gosh, a lot. I do want to. I want to mention, I really love the way that your programs have incorporated the wisdom of other people. So when you were mentioning about, you don't need the BCBA like 5 minutes away. I remember your interview with Temple Grandin and about how her mother had people come and work with her. And that's really stood out for me. I'm a pastor, but we have a lot of people in the community. And as we've had people, and I have others that I'm going to ask that to be able to help and put some of these things into place. So I want to encourage people to think about who you can bring to your team.
And it could be a church volunteer. It
Mhm.
could be a Boy Scout or Girl Scout that needs service hours, college students who need experience, mommy's helpers. It could be an older sibling who has the time. I mean, you might have to really kind of put your head together. A lot of the grandmothers are joining and reading the book and joining the courses, and they're like, let's, let me help. And so we have an interview. Well, we can put the Temple Grandin interview in the show notes. We have an interview with Grandma Diane, who's been a big part of our community and helping her daughter with the grandson. And it's just, I think as a pastor, you see that people in the community want to help, and you might be able to mobilize that in a more formal way. I've seen some churches, like I can think of one church around here that does really, they had me come in and speak years ago, and they are doing a special needs Sunday school, and they are incorporating things and to try to make it more inclusive and more supportive.
Definitely. There's a lot of, I think there's more of an awareness, and then there's a need for even greater awareness that, unfortunately, and the stereotype is, this is not my experience, but the stereotype is that kids need to be quiet in church, right? But how for communities of faith to know, transitions. How do we provide a transition for kids so that it's not just, thinking about the different needs? And we've had that in the congregation that I've served, and have lots of educational moments of having a more thoughtful about the way that we do things, and that there's not just one way to do things. What kind of toys can we have available for kids? A lot of churches are starting to do things like called playgrounds, where they provide, softer, but different kinds of toys or ways of worshiping in a specific part of the sanctuary. I think having that awareness of the needs of kids on the spectrum with that is very important. And I'm aware of communities of faith working to do that, and I've certainly been able to do some of that work here as well. But Mary, you asked me the question, what keeps me up at night? I think we all, I see my son making gains, and that makes me so delighted. I see him still getting stuck in various ways. I think it's just how far is he going to go? Get that question. But what I'm just very delighted and grateful for the whole host of people that have come around us, around my husband and I, and both our boys, to support him. I really feel very grateful for the host of professionals that we have working with us, and also just my son's uniqueness. I have a unique family background. My husband is from Indonesia. I am, from upstate New York. And so we already have, a lot of different in terms of culture and other things that we're weaving together. And just really eager to see, it's like both the worry and the joy of what will be. So.
Yeah. And one of the things that, like, I realized on literally the way home from getting the diagnosis is, my husband was saying things like, I guess he'll never get married, he'll never go to college. And I was like, would you stop? Like, even back then, that was awfully pessimistic. And I did actually interview my husband recently for a podcast, and we talked about that. I'm like, wasn't that being really pessimistic? And he's like, yeah, it's kind of embarrassing to think back that I was like ruling out everything. But like, you have a 2-year, 10-month-old who, the sky's the limit. There's nothing off the table as a possibility. Mm-hmm. And even for your older son, you don't know how his future is going to turn out either, or any of our futures. So it's like, I just want to empower parents and and professionals that are listening, even if you have typically developing kids, you have no idea what tomorrow's going to bring. And I mean, as a pastor, you know this better than anybody. And so just enjoy the progress and the strengths, and just keep putting one foot in front of the other. And I just interviewed somebody that's going to be airing right before you, Amy McFarland. I just interviewed her earlier today, and she has a son also named Lucas, and we talk about all the similarities. And her son is living alone, driving, and she still has worries, and she still has things that she does to help him. We don't know what the future is going to be, but all we can control is that we put in the right processes to give our kids the best chance of not having severe language disabilities, not having intellectual disability, if we can prevent it. And if we can't, like my son Lucas has intellectual disability on top of autism, it's not for lack of trying. But had I known what I know now, I think we could have made some headway with reversing that, preventing that, and then also trying to prevent or reverse any behavioral issues that come along, which you're trying to do with feeding and gradual exposure and all that stuff. I think your son's future is a lot brighter than it was for the kids that were born in the 90s. And so, if you're listening, just really try not to worry so much. That would be my advice.
Yeah. And don't get lost in the guilt, move forward in the positive. And that's been, just been a great gift of your work with parents. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So if you could, sit down with parents of 1 to 5 year olds, or even, you probably don't have enough experience in the autism world to give advice for older kids, parents, but, for parents who are concerned or just got a diagnosis, I mean, hopefully we've been talking all the time about, just put one foot in front of the other. Any other advice if somebody's doesn't want to deal with it? I get I just want to be a parent. I just want to leave it to the professionals. Really, do I have to do all this? I don't have the time and the energy. I don't have the resources. What would you tell them?
Yeah. Deep down, you don't have a choice. I mean, and you just really don't. And even though some days are going to be better than others, you're going to have to do the work that your child needs, and no matter what it is that they need. And there, as we've already said in the program, the incredible gift is there's a lot of resources out there. So find the resources that seem to work well for your child, and don't get overwhelmed. I do keep a journal. I find it really helpful. And I continue to work with the team of people that support my son's progress. And, I think they call it therapy for a variety of reasons. It's not only really for him, it's also for the family. And be involved to learn those things, and also realize at the end of the day that there's that I'm a minister, so I'll call it grace. There's the grace of what's going to happen. That's just not about how much work you put in either, and just about the work and what's possible for your child. So believe in that, and also believe on those days when you just can survive, you just make it, that it's not just what you do. There's it's not only what you do, you have a team there to support you. And that has been the godsend for my family. So
yeah, the old adage, you work like it all depends on you, and pray like it all depends on God. And
exactly.
There's a lot that's kind of out of your control in the end. But one thing you can control are your thoughts and your feelings and your actions and your positive attitude, because your child only has one life, but so do you. And so you can't become engulfed with it, and just moving forward in a positive way. So I think that's a great message. So wrapping up here, part of my podcast goals are for parents and professionals to be less stressed and lead happier lives. So in addition to journaling, do you do anything on a daily basis, or even just in general to reduce your stress?
Yes. Well, I've actually been working a lot on nutrition, both for my son, but also for myself, for the whole family. So that's been something big that's been really helpful for us, even just increasing your water intake. And it's amazing how much that can be helpful. Um, I'm also a runner, so I enjoy doing that when I can, getting out, and our family loves hiking. So that's something that we do together. And I research. So that's what led me to Mary's work and to others. So sometimes it's helpful to have that space to do the research so that you can continue learning. And I've found that has been a stress reducer for me.
That's interesting, because most people would think like learning would add to your stress, but you're finding the opposite. And I agree with you. Like, I am a learner. I am learning all the time. I'm taking online courses to learn how to do a webinar, or how to do this, or how to um, do anything. And so I agree. I think learning and finding your groove really, and once you start to see progress, it's so reinforcing in any way
Yes. Yes.
that you're like,
Yes.
want to keep doing it.
Yeah, and it's, we've also really found that when the stress level in our house is lower, everybody's doing better. So it is, we don't you don't want to you don't want to be like, oh, we've got this problem, I've got to attack it. Also think about the other parts of your family life where there's stress, because that's been helpful for us. And I wanted to add that in and really work on everybody's stress level and lots of positivity. I, I, I'll say, I think that's been a gift of learning more about my son, his sensitivity. It makes me more aware of how my actions, my husband's, my other son's, his, how we all impact each other, right? Especially this past year. So, I try to keep the stress low and forgive yourself for those times when it just doesn't work as you hoped.
Yeah, give yourself some grace. Excellent.
Mhm.
So this episode is going to be 125. So marybarbera.com/125 to get all the show notes, to actually watch Elizabeth and me interview. But if you want to listen, you can listen anywhere podcasts are streamed. And so it's been a great pleasure to have you on today, Elizabeth. I definitely think in the future I might want to have you back on, maybe with a panel of pastors and ministers and religious people, to talk about religion and autism and how we can get congregations to be more supportive of those on the spectrum. I think it would be a great episode, and I just learned that you were a pastor today, so we might have you do that in the future episode. So it's been a great pleasure to get to know you better. So thank you for sharing your story, and for all of your work in helping your son and helping the professionals that work with your son to learn more, to help him reach his fullest potential.
Thank you, Mary. And thank you for what you do, of course. Thank you.
If you're a parent or early intervention professional working with young children with signs of autism, or if you're a parent or professional helping older children with moderate to severe autism, you'll definitely want to order my new Turn Autism Around book today. You'll get access to all the book resources that will help you right away. For all the details, go to turnautismaround.com.